What's up, y'all? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the deepest lore through ever, the DLE Part 3. That's super bright. 1 second. A little bit better. As you can tell by the thumbnail, today we're going to be talking about the Rosarium Philosophorum. Basically, it's just a fancy word or Latin word for the processes of what the stone goes through to make it a base stone into the Philosopher's Stone. And it's a series of 10 pictures that are really, really hard to understand and hard to interpret their meaning from, and is what Carl Jung in this book, The Mysterium of the Conjunctio, that right there is the first picture that we'll be talking about today. And basically it's just a series of 10 different pictures, 10 different processes that happen in kind of this cyclical manner that take something from its base form into its higher state of being. So for, the alchemist, this would be from base stone into the philosopher's stone, and then for the psychologist, this would be the process of individuation, basically making the conscious unconscious, uniting the opposites, things like that. So, why isn't that working now? Let's see. Okay. So, to get started here, just a little bit of background on the Cumtio. And what the Cumtio means is it's just it's the process, it's the combination, it's uniting the opposites, it's what it takes to the union or reunion of these different elements that come together to make the Philosopher's Stone, or to make the self, the inner God, all that kind of stuff. So, a quote to get us started here is: the factors which come together in the Cumtio are conceived as opposites, either confronting one another in enmity or attracting one another in love. So one of the big things about this process is there's two different ways of going about it. You can go about it through kind of this very objective love, right? Which that is when you get the greater Cumtio, kind of the final version of it. And then there's another one where you go about it almost through hate and through like a chore kind of thing. And this love and hate are two different types of sulfur, which we'll talk about in a later video. But there's a thing called crude sulfur, which is like tyrannical and possessive, and kind of more of the hate emotion. And then there's the pure sulfur, which is like love. But I want to kind of, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because this is what the great runes are, right? They're mirrors or opposites of one another that come together back in its original vessel to form the Cumtio. So Mogh and Morgoth's, right? They're opposites. One is missing the center, one has the center, all that kind of stuff. And then you go about the different Rykard and Radon's, and the Rune of the Unborn, which obviously is like, things that have a ton of potential, and then Melina's, Melania's would be things that are dying, right? There's like abundance and death, which is very much what like Miquella and Melania represent. And then there's Rykard, who is blasphemous and wants to devour the gods, and there's Radon, who wants to keep kind of the things the way that they are. So all of these things are opposites that got scattered across the world and need to be brought back together in order to resolve basically the issue that's happening. If you guys are interested, if you go check out this book, it's like, I don't know, 100 pages, not even 100 pages. It's super, super interesting. And if you're at all interested in this, I would definitely recommend it. It's not an easy read, but it's super thought-provoking, and I think it'll help get a little bit of an idea of what the story of Elden Ring is talking about. So, moving down, sorry, I still have kind of that cold, which is really annoying, but the quote, the opposites constitute the most basic anatomy of the psyche. The flow of libido or psychic energy is generated by the polarization of opposite sites in the same way that electricity flows between positive and negative poles. So, and this is kind of what the story of both psychology, like depth psychology, as well as the secret of the golden flower, which we talked about kind of in my Discord, is the tension between the opposites is where life comes out, right? So here in Fair Missoula, we have the statue over and over and over again. Whether it's this one or it's the Twin Deathbird or whatever it is, there's a ton of different motifs and artwork in the game that there's two different polarizing things, and in between them is some form of life. And whether that's a tree or a flower or whatever it is, it's the energy in our will to live and our libido and all that kind of stuff is generated from these two things, these two opposites rubbing against each other, and that friction is what generates life. The problem being is that, like, so here, for example, in Fair Missoula, it's clearly the split between the ego and the shadow. I mean, this is about as basic as it gets as far as the storytelling and narrative that FromSoft's going to give us. This is where Malekith is at. This is the separation between chaos and order and all that kind of stuff. It's where America, as a child, splits into these different aspects of her psyche. And here, right, the ego and shadow, in the beginning, right, they were still close. You can think of this as like Godfrey and Sirach, where they're almost connected, and when they are connected like that, and you are holding those opposites, the friction of that leads to life. But when Marika imprisons her shadow side, and then not only imprisons it, but like tosses it to the ends of time and to the ends of space, where it's kind of outside of the lands between, the process of life becomes very static because you don't have this friction of these two forces acting against each other. So think of it as like if you only had a positive pole for electricity, like it's not going to flow between them. You need both positive and negative. And that is what this picture is telling us. So Fair Missoula, like we've talked about before, is like the beginning and end. It's where life begins, and it's kind of the reverting back to where it ends, and everything comes back together, and then the process happens over and over again. We'll talk more about those, the people statues in a later video, but so like I talked about, the secret of the golden flower, which is a Eastern Chinese kind of Taoist meditation, like inner spiritual work process. It talks about the same thing. So whether you're talking alchemy or, Western psychology, Eastern psychology, meditation, it's all talking about how these opposites, from the tension or paradox, a golden light is created. And this golden light is consciousness, right? It's our very life force that makes us act and do things and live. Quote, the golden flower alone, which grows in our inner detachment from all detanglement with things, is eternal. A man who reaches the stage transposes his ego. He is no longer limited to the monad, but penetrates the magic circle of the polar duality of all phenomena and returns to the undivided capital One, the Tao. And again, we see this, right? There's a ton of different statues in game that are just kind of a generic figure holding a golden flower. Now, that golden flower is, in my opinion, grows into the Erd tree, right? That golden flower is consciousness itself. It's our very life force. And you can see, like in this picture, and I'll show it in game here in a little bit, but all these different things show, like there's branches coming off from it. And those are the opposites. And what goes in between them is the very life force. And you see this, like Melina's Great Rune is this life force, right? It is the, like, it's almost like a sword that cuts through everything. And we see it on the motif of the Erd tree itself. We see it on the Master Hugh's anvil, where this life force is cutting through the different opposites and the different stuff that is coming from our psyche. So this is still we're still talking, we're trying to get an understanding of what makes up the different elements that make up the Kyumtio and how the process, kind of from a 30,000 foot view, how it happens. So understanding the opposites is key to the psyche, but it's a dangerous key because one is dealing with the elemental machinery of the psyche. If the machine is taken apart, one might not put it back together again. We meet ourselves time and time again in 1,000 disguises in the path of life. We will collect our scattered psyche from the outer world as Isis gathered the dismembered body of Osiris, and in doing that, we'll be working on the Kyumtio. So all of these things talk about the shattering of the Elden Ring, right? So the beginning of this process starts with this psychological fracture, where the very elemental parts of the machinery of our psyche, the opposites, are fractured out into the outer world. And then we will go about collecting those and forming them back, uniting those opposites and forming them back into their original individual, just as kind of the myth of Osiris goes. If the project conflicts, if the projected conflict is to be healed, and the projected conflict here is the shattering war, right? It's the fact that all of these individual pieces of America, right, these opposites, are at war with one another. It's to be healed. It must return into the psyche of the individual. And this is what we see at the end of the game, right? We are collecting these different types of things, and eventually we are putting them back into America so they can be reunited with one another, and the life force, right? Like what we saw with the beginning photo, the opposites are now in contact with one another again, and life can basically start over again. So just as the falling leaves tell a story, the falling leaves is the end of life, or like the static life. Once we put these things, because it's that way because the opposites are so far removed from one another that the life force can't be generated between them. The electricity between the positive and negative poles isn't happening. So once we put that back together inside America, inside the vessel, inside the individual, it's starting to form again, and that the tree starts to rebloom, a new way of life happens, all that kind of stuff. So it must return to the psyche of the individual, who was America, where it had its beginnings. Which is why I say a lot, like, these are just aspects of America's psyche. So I think that sometimes I say that they are America, and that just means that they're aspects of her, not like they are literally America, like wearing a disguise. They're just aspects of her psyche. They're the elemental machinery of her psyche. Means that she must recognize and accept the other in herself. and she must bear her own cross. So all these reuniting of the opposites, it's about coming to terms and accepting the different aspects of yourself that encompass you as a whole. And this is each and every one of us. This is our own cross to bear. So that was a lot, but let me so that kind of gives just a little bit of a very quick understanding of exactly what the Rosarium Philosophorum is talking about. It is about the process of the alchemical magnum opus. It's about the process of the individuation, where at the beginning, as a child, all of these things are in existence with one another. There's no friction or fractions or divisions in your psyche. Like, you are just a child who's living their life. And then once that happens and fractures occur, later on in life, you need to go back and you need to accept and love those other parts of you that you once kind of cast aside. So the very first picture of the Rosarium is called the Mandela Fountain, or the Mercurial Fountain. It represents, so basically we'll quickly go over the picture. So at the picture you have a two-headed serpent, and the two-headed serpent is spewing out these two vapors. And these two vapors are like wet and dry vapors. One forms into, I don't remember exactly, but it's the four elements, right? So one half is like fire and water, and the other half is earth and air. And it represents the prima materia and ultima materia, the alpha omega, the beginning and the end of the process, and it sits outside of the process. So the two-headed dragon representing Placidusex, and where it's the beginning and the end of the process and sits outside of the lands, right? It sits outside of time, it sits outside of the cycle, because it's the beginning and it's the end. And then you move down a little bit and you have the Mercurial Fountain, which represents the foundation of the psyche prior to the birth of the ego. So this Mercurial Fountain is like the crucible. It's where everything is still living in harmony with one another. There is no birth, there is no conscious ego that starts to fracture and divide these things. And then Mercurial / Mercurius, which we will talk about a bunch, is synonymous with the mother's womb. So we'll see later in the images how basically these opposites form out of this Mercurial Fountain, and then at some point later they descend back into this Mercurial Fountain, aka the mother's womb. And in my Elden Lord video, I talked about the importance of kind of the analogy of a mother's womb being kind of this foundation of life, right? Like, the mother's womb is the crucible itself. It's where there is no divisions and fractures and stuff like that. It's the very life essence. It's the things that give birth to everything. And then up a little bit, just below the dragons, is the sun and the moon, which represents just any pair of opposites. And I think that this is, a lot of people get hung up on this, I think, because, like, I know that sun and moon and then the red king and the white queen are like the major images, which we will see in the Rosarium. But it's really important to realize that those things are just representing any pair of opposites. So good and evil, silver and gold, chaos and order, like literally as simple as up and down, north and south. Like, any pair of opposites is just represented by these things. So just because we don't see like the sun and the moon in, let's say, like Radon and Rykard, doesn't mean that they don't fit this. It's just those two things are opposites, and it's just the symbol of those opposites are usually the sun and the moon or the king and the queen. So, and And then the goal of individuation is to get back to our childlike psyche without fractures. So that means that the child is both the beginning and the end, the prima and ultima materia. The reason that the goal of individuation is to get back to this childlike psyche is because when we are operating in our childlike psyche, we operate in this kind of unconscious reptilian type space in our psyche. And it's very much our self, capital self. It's very much our inner God. It's who we truly are. Now, we go through processes of growing and developing, so each time we get back and revert back to like this childlike psyche, we're a better version of it, right? Which is what we see with like America and Miquella. Is the reason Miquella starts as a childlike kind of entity is because the end of the process is going back to the childlike psyche. It's just a better, more developed version, further along in development compared to America 1.0. Like America 2.0 is Miquella, who is about love and healing and all this type of stuff, and not about like ego desires and things like that. So, which is again why we see in Malika's boss room the child surrounded by those three wolves. It is, we are going right back to that point where things are separated and then the opposites come back together, and we are that childlike inner God self. And then as soon as we go and we sit on the Elden Throne and we make our own order, that is our own ego being born again, and the separation starts again. And then we go right back and we end back up in Fair Missoula, where we reunite everything, we put it back in America, and then we start our own order. And this is why the Memory of Grace talks about that it's just a cyclical, over and over again process where you become Elden Lord, you brandish the Elden Ring, and then it starts over again, and everything just kind of is a cycle. And as we get further into, so like the next time that I'll talk about the second image, which is the emergence of opposites, which again we see in that child statue where it's one is order and one is chaos. And the emergence of opposites is shown in the Elden Ring in Malika's boss room, where we're starting to see the more orderly Elden Ring coming out of the more chaotic kind of crucible. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening at Fair Missoula that is brought to life in game kind of via this picture. And when I am talking about how this is all happening in America's psyche, and people like really struggle with that, and then what I try to remind them of is like this process right here, this one image is one step that is happening to a stone, right? It's not like this is literally happening. It's just this is the images that the alchemists see as they are as this first step is happening. And the same thing is happening in game. Like this image is happening in a flask to a stone. Like that's the reality of it. In game, this is happening to America, who is stone-like, right? And we are just acting out what these pictures are kind of bringing to life. So, and that's like a very hard concept for people to understand. But hopefully, when thinking about it that way, like it gives a little bit more clarity to that this is happening inside America's psyche, because this is also happening inside of a flask. Like, there's not actually two dragons that pop out and start to, spew vapor, and then a sun and a moon pop out. Like, no, this is just what is happening in the imagination of the alchemist as a representation of what they see happening to that stone. So, hopefully that gives a little bit of understanding to. So we'll go back to Carl here in a second, my character, but I wanted to just quickly kind of go through some images and what we're seeing with Fair Missoula to kind of bring this first image home. So it being the beginning and the end, it being the division of opposites where this life force is coming out, it being also the emergence of those opposites and them coming back together into this childlike state. So in Malekith's boss room, we see these two, this image, right, where it's two just creatures that are mirror images of each other. And then in between them is what looks like a tree. And a tree or flower or whatever is very indicative and is a symbol usually for life. So these two opposite things in between them are life. I don't really have to show you this, but just to, again, so our goal is to revert back to this childlike psyche. And then that is also the emergence of opposites. So chaos, representing the three wolves, and then order, represented by the little girl. And then same thing that we see here. And we know that the map is a fetus in a womb. So the water surrounding it, right, is the mercurial fountain. It's the mercurius. It's the mother's womb. It's kind of the thing that envelops and coagulates everything and gives everything life, and brings things back together. And here we see that's exactly what is happening with Fair Missoula, is it's outside of time and space. It's the beginning and the end, and it is completely enveloped by the mercurial fountain. And I think that the reason that it's a tornado and stuff like that is because that it kind of brings to life like a very fountain-esque, like it could either be the vapors in the first image, or it could be like the fountain where it's spewing water. What else? Oh, and the reason that there's dragons here, right, and beastmen, and it's very much the beginning of the story, is because it is the beginning of the story. And the reason that there's a childlike statue here is because it's also the end of the story. So it also represents the fact that we're operating in our like reptilian unconscious brain, where dragons are kind of the domain of the unconscious that we talked about before. So all of these different things about Fair Missoula just fit so incredibly well with this first stage, or this first image and first process and last process of the Rosarium. Let me see. So here's just another image, right, of two opposite forces pushing against each other, and a flower is coming out of them. Just again, the opposites being the kind of the friction that gives things life. I wonder if I've never really looked at his area before. So his area is the same as Malekith's area. Hmm. Um, I think we were talking about it either in the Discord or one of the comments. How Bloodborne is, it seems to be uh, a real life story of a patient who was in uh, the hospital in like the 1500s of uh, in Scotland, in Edinburgh, I think. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it's literally like that one book seems to almost be the one for one inspiration of what the game is bringing to life. And these Rosarium, this mystery of the Kyuntio, seems to be this same thing, where it's these 10 processes, these 10 images, seem to be a very big inspiration for Miyazaki and FromSoft as far as bringing Elden Ring to life. And I think as we go through these 10 different pictures and we see the next several steps and the different images associated with them, the different psychological meanings behind them, I think hopefully it will become more and more clear that this is a huge inspiration for the game. So as far as the first image, I mean that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. The first image, this is a 100-page book. The first image is like literally like half of a page. Like there's not a whole bunch to it. It's just what it is. It's like the beginning and end. It talks about the prima and ultima materia. It is yeah. Yeah, it's a diary from a man who stayed at the infirmary. Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yeah, and nice Marma, do you mind just who is the YouTube video that is our YouTube channel that's talking about it now, because it's fucking awesome. It's the fact that like, and like no shade, but like some of these lore videos can get like 500,000 views for just reading item descriptions, and then like this guy is like pouring his heart and soul into something, and it's got like, it should have like millions of views. But if you're interested in it, definitely go check it out, because it's pretty sweet. And we'll talk about this a little bit more once we actually get and play through Fair Missoula, because there's a lot of other things here that really bring home this the essence of like a mother's womb, the fountain, the beginning of opposites, the prima and ultima materia, like all these different things. It really brings to life once you play through it. But that's for Carl. Um, so we left Carl off here. We just got to the round table hold. And we talked about how it's like this spiritual church where these people that have been touched by this mercurious entity, right? America, this great mother archetype, which again we'll talk about later, but it's also in the very first lore video of mine. The Great Mother being like it's called the Great and Terrible Mother. So it's too much to go into right now. But I'll do the same thing here where I'll make a few slides and talk about it and give a little bit more understanding to what that means and what the archetype embodies. But anybody that's been touched by this Great Mother, by this Mercurius, seems to end up here as a tarnish at the round table hold. And they're all kind of connected through this mercurial entity. And then here again we see that golden flower statue where you have these differing, on one side it's like the opposites that are springing off, and then right down the middle is this golden flower that is this life essence. And then before I forget, I just wanted to show you one more thing. God, I sound like crap. Sorry, guys. So here we see, and it's almost America's Great Rune, right? The top of it. And we see this kind of driving force right down the middle of it, just like the golden flower. That is, like, again, the crucible roots are at the bottom, and then up top is a little bit more like a symmetrical configuration, and what's driving through all of it is this this life force, this consciousness. And we see that over and over and over again in Elden Ring, throughout the different statues and character art and weapon art and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to shut up for a little bit, and we're just going to talk to some of these NPCs and get a better idea of, now that we kind of have this groundwork laid out and we know the end goal, maybe we can reverse engineer this and see what these characters are trying to do, and if each one of them is trying to unite an opposite, or if they are an embodiment of that opposite. Sorry, I got distracted by this thing. Alright, Fia first.
Greetings, great champion called by grace. I am Fia. Circumstances have compelled my stay at the Round Table Hold. Great champion, would you allow me to hold you? But briefly, perhaps you might share with me some of your lively vigor and your stout-heartedness. Doing so will grant me the warmth of a champion, and you, I am sure, will bear a Baldakin's blessing. Do you think it vulgar, perhaps? Where I come from, it is a sacred act. Ah, my thanks, great champion. You are very warm. What you felt light up inside you was a Baldakin's blessing. Though it is but a fleeting thing, I am afraid. Come back to me, should you require another. I will take you in my arms as often as you need.
The story of John Hunter is a notable inspiration to the Bloodborne as well. Him and his brother did some of the first documentation of development of the fetus in the mother's womb. Ooh, that was the ritual menses, I think. Interesting. So, Fia asked you to hold her so she can get the warmth of a champion, and like this warmth of the champion seems to be what she's able to use to like bring back or put to rest or whatever the dead. She seems to almost be wearing exactly what Marika was wearing in like the opening cutscene where she is kind of crucified and she's dressed all in black. And then here we have the Baldekin's Blessing. Favor bestowed upon, by a deathbed companion, protection of a hidden temple in guise of a bedchamber. The favor allows one to forget any aches and pains. In death there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. And if you notice, the image is a mirror image of itself. With what's in between it is like this little sliver of light. Talked to Hugh last time. Talked to this a-hole.
Oh, this is a rare occasion. I can't remember the last time a new tarnished made their way to the round table. Very well. As your senior, I bid you welcome. It is safe here. You may let down your guard. Allow me a word of advice. As your senior, you are a mere visitor to the round table. Nothing more. A house guest. Yet to earn their keep. Remember your place. Newcomer. There's nothing left to say.
We also talked about in one of the comments of the video, we talked about how Gideon more than likely represents the wise old man, and there's several times that he is kind of referred to as like the old, like this old man or the kind of OG of the Round Table Hold who thinks that he knows everything and thinks that he's wise, which is why I say that if the yellowing happens, if this, you know, encounter with the wise old man takes place, it's more than likely Gideon.
Oh, I see you've just arrived. Welcome to the Round Table Hold. I'm Corin, a man of the cloth. I teach incantations, the strength granted us by the two fingers, and explore the secrets of the Golden Order, so that one day, if a tarnished of the Round Table Hold should become Elden Lord, I might counsel them, ensuring order regains its proper form, righting rule over men. Anyway, do you still see it? The guidance of grace. You do. Wonderful news. Most tarnished are blind to it these days. You are something of a rare breed. Well, what do you say? Care to learn an incantation of two fingers?
We've gone through these in other videos, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it. But all of like the fortification ones, basically, they're saying that everything is going to be against the tarnished. Like the tarnished is like it's almost like where this foreign free radical in an immune system where we are coming in and everything is trying to attack us and kill us and get us out of there. And we'll kind of, as we're going, we'll kind of talk about why that is the case and what that means and why tarnished are so hated and despised in the lands between. And here we have at the center of the round table hold is the I believe it's the crucible seal mark. And what I get from this picture is that every kind of sword or axe or whatever that is driven into it and fracturing it is another time that the system kind of restarts and the cycle restarts. The thing that I don't know is if every single one of these people became Elden Lord, or how that process works, or if they're just blows to the unconscious that revert back to basically stage one. Because we'll talk more about this in a future video, but once you get to stage 5, there's certain things that have to happen, and if they don't happen, you revert back to stage 1. And basically the cycle can go 1 through 5 over and over and over and over and over again before 5 finally the right ingredients are put together for 5 to move on to stage 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10. And we'll talk about that once we get to there. But I don't know if that is what this is, all of the different attempts that America has made to kind of better herself and to grow in the different kind of adaptations that have happened in her psyche, where each one of these weapons resembles kind of the uniting of an opposite within her, or what exactly that means. But I think it's really important that this looks very similar, right? Like the stone and the fracture looks very similar to what we see kind of America do and go through in the opening scene, and how we see her in the inside the Erdtree, where she's very much fractured and stone-like. And the fact that it's the crucible seal, again, the crucible being the unconscious, where things are childlike and there's no fractures or divisions and you're whole and united. Each one of these could be the fact that this new ego consciousness, this new eruption of opposites is taking place and is a blow to and a fracturing of that wholeness. But again, we'll figure out more as we go.
Hello. You must be new here. Well, just call me Dialos. The honor of one's house holds little import in these lands. By the way, have you met a young woman named Lamia on your travels? She's my servant, but fickle as the wind. Take your eyes off her for but a moment and she's good as gone. If you find her, please be sure to tell me. Be sure to
Will
tell
do.
me if you meet a young woman named Lamia. She's a servant to my house. She's been my companion since childhood. I've lost count of the number of times I've had to find her like this. Honestly, she's such a little tomboy.
If you guys are enjoying this stuff, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the stream, that helps a ton. And also, if you haven't, check out my lore videos and stuff. I'm actually working on one right now, and then the next one that I'll do is kind of redoing the first one, because there's a lot of shit that's changed. Okay, I think we're done here. Let's see here. Let's continue this run, just picking up stuff. And alchemy, and also a ton of other, just epics and fables and novels and stuff. Ravens are a symbol of death, and of rotting and stuff like that. So the fact that Khaled is kind of overrun by ravens, is just another kind of thematical symbolism that's at play. We gotta go. We gotta go. Uh-oh. In the four stages of kind of the magnum opus with Negredo and then Albedo. Last time we talked about the Negredo stage and it being the blackening and death. And Negredo split into two different things, with Negredo being step one being mortificatio, and then step two being putreficatio, where mortificatio is death. It's usually the death of the ego, and then the second is putreficatio, which is rotting, and rotting is known to be like this incredibly powerful process because nothing can really escape it, and it brings about death and then rebirth of something, because when things rot, they decay and then something new grows from it, and that's kind of the whole like point of individuation and of the magnum opus, is this new, something new and better comes from the old, and you have to have the death of the old before you can have the birth of the new. And I think it's a really cool symbolism at play with the fact that with Khaled being the feet of the fetus that is the Erdtree, meaning it's kind of like the base, it's the bottom of it, and we see that Godwyn is dead and rotting at the base of the Erdtree, and that is coming. That is brought to us again through the map via the fact that rot is at the feet of the fetus or of this baby, and that it is entered into not only that it's dead, but it's also beginning to rot. Um, all right. Let's we're gonna start moving south and kind of let's see here. Yeah, let's do that. And just as we talked about with Mortificatio being the death of a king, and the king representing the ego consciousness, and the fact that we see the same crowned figure here on all these different hearses and carriages. At first, I thought that it represented America's real father, like it was her real father figure that died, and this is why she's so afraid of death. But the more that I am reading these things and getting a better understanding of them, is that each one of these carriages seem to be the kind of latest ego consciousness that formed out of the Crucible. And all of these different carriages are holding that king, which represents the ego, and the death of that ego. But I'd be curious to know what you guys think of that. Jesus criminy. So that that rune bear down there, the fact that he was asleep next to a pond very much tells us the story of that again, we know that kind of the water represents the unconscious. And that's exactly where we go when we are dreaming and sleeping, is we go into the realm of the unconscious. We kind of go into the shadow side where things that we've been repressing and afraid to confront are brought to life. Which is why, like, in game, we see all of these death-related things being brought to life at night because America is repressing death, right? She has shackled death to her shadow-bound beast. So it's leaking out of her during her dreams, during when she is entering into this realm of the unconscious. And the fact that we see these bears, right, they're either dreaming by this a body of water, which represents the unconscious, or they are dreaming because of Saint Trina's lilies, being that Saint Trina is kind of the domain that she resides in seems to be this dream world, this unconscious world. And I believe it's not until we actually pick one of these. Oh, maybe not. Once we get down here a little bit, we'll read some of these item descriptions and see if we can figure out what's...
Yes, right. Welcome. Customer. Please, I'm hungry.
Do we need any of this? Not really. Not at the moment. I'll be back. I'll be back. And again, I talked about this in the last in the last kind of playthrough like this, where oh shit, there's certain emotions that are attached to various places within the lanes between. like Limgrave and the Weakened Peninsula are like we're at Fort Hate right now, right? And hate is a very strong emotion, and what we find in it is elements of blood. We find blood roses, and we find the Ash of War that talks about blood and all that kind of stuff. And we also know that Mogh is kind of the Lord of Blood, and he's almost the Lord of Hate, because of his upbringing and things. Because of his upbringing and things like that. And it's important to connect the different thematical narratives that are being told in different various ways with one another, because they start to bring the elements of the story into more of a kind of holistic, rounded way. That's so fast. I love it. Oh, let me see. Hold on, Rogue. Let me get to you in a second, bruh. And the other thing that's within Fort Hate is the death of a mother. And there's a very specific reason, like, Jesus Christ, I just got whooped up. Oh, bomb him. Bomb him! Oop. Are you fucking kidding me? Come on. I'm gonna hide over here for a second. Very, very sneaky. Carl is a little sneaker. Oh! Bitch. Bitch. Oh, where'd he go? Okay, where is this mother freaker? This mother freaker. Come on. Oh, jeez. Nope. No! Rogue says, I'm curious about Miquella's and Marika's relationship just because there are a lot of parallels between the characters, and Miquella seems to be of rising importance. So I think Miquella is Marika 2.0. Which we kind of talked about at the beginning of this, with where the whole goal, right, of whether it's the magnum opus and you're literally talking about a stone, or you take it more psychologically and you're talking about the person, the self, is to create a new, better version of that base material. So, Miquella would be that newer, better version of the base material that is America, which is why they have so many different. They look the same. There's so many different parallels you can draw between them. Is because they are literally like Miquella's had just a software update from America 1.0. So just as the Philosopher's Stone, you start with stone, right? And at the end of it, you still have a stone. It's just that that stone has gone through a ton of different processes that make it a better version of what it already was. And the same is true with when you relate the alchemical magnum opus to the human psyche, is you are still a person, right? And you are still you're still you. It's just that the end result at the end of all these processes is just a better version of yourself. And again, like we talked about at the beginning, the goal is to revert back to your childlike state of mind where there is no divisions and fractures. Oh, you bastard. That sucks. That sucks. Bomb him. Bomb him. Bomb him. Jeez, you guys are a bunch of dicks. Uh-oh, this is not good. Jesus. Oh no. No! Oh shit. Man, Carl is an absolute stud. Once we sit down, oh, I forgot to look at any of my stuff. Sorry, guys. And the further that we go along the stages, and we talk about why some Kyunktios are lesser, and others are kind of the full effect, is because of what the motivational drive for that is. So if it's a personal desire, if it is for personal gain, it will, the result would be a lesser Kyunktio, where it's not a philosopher's stone that is at the end of it. It's kind of this monstrous dragon-like thing, which is the Elden Beast. If what you are doing is purely out of love for your other parts of yourself, that we see, like what we see with Miquella. Like Miquella, he doesn't care about anything other than trying to heal people. Like he tries to heal Melania, and he tries to bring back Godwyn, and all these things, and they're just strictly out of love. Then the end result of that will actually be the greater Kyunteo. It will be the Philosopher's Stone. It will be like this very powerful being that has the ability to heal people fully. And like what we see with Miquella in game is that he doesn't really have that yet. He's still developing and growing, which is why we have to do this process one more time. How you doing? You have to know, Wolf, if that makes sense to you. And I think, again, like I said, the further that we go through this process, the more that it will make sense. So basically, what it comes down to, like I talked about at the beginning, are the two different types of sulfur that you use to further the process of the Philosopher's Stone. Crude sulfur is embodied by Mogh, where it's tyrannical, it's possessive, it's desirous, it's like lustful, and you're doing it all for your own gain. He's doing it to make the Moghwyn dynasty, right? Like he steals Miquella for his own gain, which is why it stops right there. Like when you have a lesser Kyunteo, the next thing that happens is mortificatio, is death. And if you do it out of love, right, and if you do it just purely out of care for your fellow self, then the process moves past that stage. So what we see with Mogh is that playing out, basically. So let's read some of this stuff that we picked up and see if we can make some sense out of it. These are just eyeballs. I'm almost positive, but doesn't really matter right now. So we picked up the Arteria leaf, which is incredibly important because it tells you that the map is alive, that the world is alive, and we see that with the map being a fetus. A pulse can be felt in the veins. Blood rose, particularly beloved by those who serve the Lord of Blood, glory to his inevitable reign. So, kind of what we talked about earlier, this complete overtake of hate, of rage, seems to be associated with blood, and with Mogh himself being the kind of crude version of sulfur. And every time that we see kind of something that has happened, like we just went into Fort Hate, and what we saw was the death of a demigod mother, and what came out of that was the emotion hate, which is why Blood Rose is there, and why the Blood Knight is there, because that is connected with that emotion. Just like when we see rot, right? Like rot is connected with an emotion, and we see the effects of that throughout the whole lands between. The same thing for hate. Bloodslash, Blood Oath, skilled, granted by the Lord of Blood. Doesn't really tell you much there, other than it's super OP. All right, now that we've done that, let's go get our snap. We'll talk to, what's his name? Hello?
May I have a word? A pleasure to meet thee, Tarnished. I am Senna.
Rogue says, I see, do you think Mogh's intervention was a part of Miquella's plan? I just find it very convenient that Miquella was left in a very vulnerable state and Melina wasn't by his side during such an event. No, I don't think it was part of Miquella's plan. I think it's just, that's the stage that we're on. We're still doing it like Marika is, because she hasn't embraced her shadow side and she's not loving a big part of herself. The reason that she's going through this process is for like desire and not out of love, and that is brought to light by Mogh. So I don't think it's like I think Miquella only has one plan, and it's like to make the world better. I don't think that he has like I don't think he's like I forget the word, I can't think of the word right now, but I don't think he's like sneaking around trying to come up with different plans in order to be in power. Like, I think that he only cares about like healing and making the world whole. So Mogh being the crude sulfur and stopping it there is because the process can't go on any further until you embrace and love those other parts of yourself, and then you can move forward. Again, the Rosarium photos and pictures and images will kind of bring that to life. Oh, you're good, dude. Yeah, no worries. Once we're done, or you can do it now, but it might be worth just going through like the first 15 minutes and getting an idea of it.
This for thee, and Torrent's former master.
So we get the Spirit Calling Bell and the Lone Wolf Ashes, both of which are very much in tune with the unconscious, right? The things that have been repressed, or the things that are hidden kind of in the dream world.
'Tis a bell calling forth spirits. Summon them with it. From ash and return to the earth tree. The spirits will obey thine command but briefly.
And notice that she only comes out during the night. She is only here during this narrative at night. So again, she represents an element of the unconscious that is trying desperately to reunite these two things, or at least to give the unconscious a the time, the light, and the love that it deserves. I have an observation about Miquella Melania that I want to try and fit into the theme of repeating cycles. Yeah, absolutely, man. Melania and Miquella draw parallels to the ancient conflict between God of Rot and Blue Dancer. Melania, God of Rot, Miquella, Blue Dancer, or Blind Swordsman. This feels to me like a triumph of abundance / growth over rot and decay. Yep. More confusing is Melania is in fact a blind swordsman. Yeah. I have thoughts on that. So like I've talked about earlier, it seems that emotional states are tied to outer gods. Like we just talked about Mogh, like rage and hate seem to be the formless mother that like literally combust your blood into fire, and like basically you're tyrannical and you want to take over the world, more or less. It seems that rot is this element of guilt or depression, and it kind of decays you from the inside out. And to me, when I think of like the Melania being the goddess of rot, means that she is completely enthralled in this so the twins are born, right? And the twins represent opposites. So she represents kind of like this despair, depression, guilt-ridden emotional state that literally rots you from the inside out. And Miquella represents hope and abundance and everything that's the opposite of that. So these two concepts need to come together. But like I said, they're not mature enough yet. Like we need to do this process one more time in order for these two opposites to unite. So the blue dancer, blind swordsman, who once conquered the god of rot and sealed it away, I think is just it's a person who was able to overcome this depressive kind of emotional existence. And I think, again, it's really hard once we get to them, it's easier to talk about because we have a lot of like statues and narrative and things to go off of. But yeah. Yeah, and not only is it a triumph over abundance, but it's like it's the next step. So once something rots, the next thing to come is rebirth and growth. From a new thing comes out of the death of the old thing. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yep. Yeah, exactly. They're more refined versions of these opposing traits. Yep. Yep. So you'll notice that there's like two sets of great runes that overlap with one another. And just like what we saw in the Round Table Hold, where this process of ego, birth, and opposites forming out of that seems to occur every time that there's these children that are birthed, right? Or they're just opposites that form out of America's new ego. And at the moment, they are completely like Osiris's body. They are dismembered and they're scattered around the world. And it's up to us to find all these different versions of the opposites, right? All these different refinements, and reconnect them and reunite them. The problem is that there's no Miquella is still kind of like lost. It is still growing. So we have to do this one more time before the opposite of this decay, of this rot, is fully formed enough to unite, I guess, is kind of. Yeah, of course, man. Of course. Seems like you're pretty much new to streaming. Yep. Yep, pretty much. Very new. I got all this stuff from you. Okay. And speaking of opposing traits, the D brothers are interesting with similarities to America Miquella. One soul, two bodies. Yeah. Yeah, one there's tons of those where there seems to be a separation of like psyche amongst two different people or a set of twins or whatever that are like opposing qualities. And then also in that first picture of the Rosarium, we saw the sun and the moon, which represents, the sun represents ego consciousness and the moon represents the unconscious. So Ronnie, with what we can only assume to be her great rune up on the moon, means that she is very much an element of the unconscious. And once we talk about the next, well, actually, what we talked about before was the mortificatio of the king or of the soul or of the sun is the killing of the ego by the shadow, which is exactly what, and the shadow being kind of like the queen of the unconscious. And we see that with Ronnie stealing a fragment of the Rune of Death to kill Godwyn the ego. Alright, let's go here. Oh, you bastard. Damn it. Oh, boy. And speaking of the D brothers, you'll also notice that the armor that they're wearing changes once the other D brother kills Fia. And once I go back to D in the Round Table Hold, we'll see that the arm that is holding the weapon is the silver arm, which is silver is the moon is the unconscious, and it's like the repressed part. So without them even knowing, it is the unconscious that is wounding the ego at the moment, which again is what we see with Ronnie, the shadow, and the unconscious killing the ego consciousness of America, that is Godwyn. one thing I forgot to mention is that the mercurial fountain, the water that it exudes is also called like the elixir vitae, the sap of life, which gives life to things, like we talked about earlier. And Marika being this mercurius entity, the Great Mother, and the fact that from her we get these sacred tears, right, that basically add more life to us, is just another kind of narrative, thematical feature that is being brought to life, which I think is just, again, it's the different ways that they're telling us the story is really, really cool.
Spoken echoes linger here, words of Queen Marika, who vanished long ago. If you wish, I will share them with you. Very well. In Marika's own words, my lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die. Well, perhaps that might serve you.
Yeah, that's great.
In lieu of a maiden's guidance.
So Melina, being the self, being the inner god, being the end goal of this whole thing, is because she holds within her the opposites, right? Like, we know that she has one gold eye and one purple eye, the conscious and the shadow. And then she also has the gold hair of Marika and the red hair of Radigan, the anima and the animus. She is the Philosopher's Stone. She is the lapis. She is the son of the philosopher. She is the end goal. And we know that Ranni, right, the eye that Ranni has shut or whatever, lines up with Melina's eye that is shut. And although I don't think Ranni is the Glow-Eyed Queen, I think that her being in contact with the shadow, with the Rune of Death, and her now being kind of this spirit or this soul entity is the game's way of showing that she is in the unconscious, she's in the shadow realm, which is the missing piece of Melina. And Ronnie's whole goal is to kind of bring that unconscious shadow side into the domain of Marika's consciousness, which will eventually open up Melina's other eye. So there the echoes that she just told to us basically just said that if you are a warrior of Godfrey's, you are going to be sent away and you will live and die in another place outside of Lands Between, where you will wage war and basically become stronger. And we know this now to be, these warriors to be candidates for the Animus, right? For Marika's counterpart, for the Elden Lord. And she needs them to grow and develop just as she is growing and developing. The problem being is that you are the proper way to do it psychologically is you don't separate yourself from your animus, right? You grow and develop together. But the fact that she's separated from her animus in this, the echoes that we just saw, or just heard, is she is now repressing the animus, right? The animus goes into the unconscious, and is basically, that is where the next stage of the animus will come from. But because they're not one, right? They're not united like what we see later with Radigan America. Because she has repressed this aspect of herself. The quote that Carl Jung says is, if you repress your anima or animus, it will marry your shadow. So it will go against you and actually be in favor of your shadow side. And we'll talk about it more once we get down to the Weak Peninsula, but it's no coincidence that the March of the Tarnished takes Godfrey and his brethren basically from the Smoldering Church to the Morn's Castle and goes off into water, which is the unconscious. And what's born out of that, what we see in the fourth church of, or in the Church of Pilgrimage, our very first kind of visual of Radigan, is Radigan. So basically, what's happening in that section is Godfrey gets hounded, leaves, goes off into the watery unconscious, and then the next stage is brought to life via Radigan. And he is like the hero of Morn, which we'll talk about once we get there. So Malekith right there, what is your thoughts on Ronnie's spirit being exposed? What do you mean by that? You mean like why she has like, she's kind of like a dual thing, and part of it is like a spirit body? So, Malekith there is basically repenting, right? And has become monk-like because his one job was to contain destined death. And somebody stole a piece of it, so now he was trying to consume every single bit of death root possible. To repent for his sins. Yeah. So I think that's just showing, because we know that when Godwin and Ronnie die, one dies in soul and one dies in body. So I think it's just showing that Ronnie is the soul, or like the spirit, that is still free. And I think it's just showing that so that way the player can kind of understand that her spirit is inhabiting this doll. I think that's how I take it anyways.
Who goes there? Carly sent you, did he? Never the bloody busybody. Maybe to him you don't seem so strange. The
And then, like, if you look on his armor, we see like two women that are like embracing each other, right? And what's coming between them is again another tree. So this is just America. This is basically America and the Glowmite Queen, and America not being in touch with her shadow is why life has kind of ceased to exist, because the friction from these opposites is no longer there. And him being a shadow-bound beast is bound to the shadow. So, oh, almost got me, dude. Good freaking dodge. Oh my god. Oh, man, I'm doing terrible. Come on, bitch. Come on, bitch. Hi.
Tarnished, are we? I wonder you should turn up here. I am Salem, a sorcerer, quite plainly. Why are you here? A yam for glintstone sorceries. I dare say your proclivities are far from ideal. Oh well, perhaps nurture will defy nature. With a bit of luck. But one must choose one's masters wisely. I was exiled from the Academy of Lorethrough as a reviled, apostate witch. Do you still wish to learn from me?
Yeah, okay.
Well, you are a piece of work. Very well. You are now my protege in glintstone sorcery. But I refuse to coddle or cast kind words. Never. Anticipate grievances, young apprentice. Young apprentice,
Oop.
you are a tadpole when it comes to magic. Infantile. Without the legs to walk. So, to become a sorcerer, first, you must face your ignorance. Now, shall we start learning?
In my opinion, she gives a big clue there that things that are young and infantile are not able to walk or don't have their ability to use their legs, which we see with the Albinaurics, especially like the first generation, where they lose their legs because they are like the first iteration of it. The amount of times that this game talks about kind of infants and stages of development, once you're like aware of it, it's pretty saturated kind of everywhere. Oh, you dick! Get out of here! Okay. Whoa! Just panicked a little bit there. Oh my god. Thank you. And we see later in game that it seems to be that the place where these hearses are going seem to be the Hallowed Tree. And Miquella talks about trying to bring Godwyn, the ego, kind of back to life. And if every single one of these is a different version of the ego consciousness, then it would make sense that when he talks about, like, oh brother, die a true death or whatever, he's not specifically talking about Godwyn, but he's talking about all of these hearses that have, quote unquote, all of his brothers in there. Jeez, you're a tough guy. Wolf says, the death Malekith is eating is no longer destined death, in my opinion. It's death born from stagnation, which is why I think he isn't doing well and isn't satisfied when consuming the death rod. Yeah, I would agree. Destined death is already... There's... because a portion of it has been stolen by Ronnie, like, you're never getting... It's never going back in, right? So yeah, he's consuming death root, which is just the result of the death, rather than death itself. I got all sorts turned around here. God damn it!
No. This is where it ends for you.
Get him! There you go. Ooh. You got him. Come on, Blade. You're getting your ass whooped, homie. You're welcome.
Right.
It's interesting that he has
But it's done. Don't say I'm not a word. Here's your prize.
flasks.
Oh yes. I should say, if you venture north to Raya Lucaria and come across a venerable blacksmith who's a little on the large side, tell him I sent you, and he'll be sure to treat you right. I owe you one, I reckon. That's enough chit-chat for now. It's time we parted ways.
All right, let's go do the dragon. And then maybe patches, and then probably call it there. Get me good. Oh! That is not what I meant to do. What an idiot. That's not fair. What? Oh, that is some bull. Oh. How did that miss? Oh no! Oh, I did it again! Oh, what an asshole! come on. Oh, this is some bullshit. Oh, you bitch. You bitch. Mm. God damn it. Come on. Come back down. Uh-huh. Beat the shit out of you. Oh, he almost got me again. Woo! So again, just notice. I'm just being. There we go. Just notice where this dragon came from, right? He just appeared kind of from the same blue mist that Melina and Ronnie appear in. And not only that, but also in a lake, which again, water being the unconscious. And we'll see once we get to Ronnie's. We'll do that. We'll do that in a bit. We'll do it now. Fuck it. Once we get to Ronnie's, the Carian house, they seem to have like this ritual around this water feature. They seem to be trying to almost summon something or and that something would be something that is in the unconscious, the realm of the moon. I have no idea what I should. I never know. If anybody has any fun builds, let me know. Ow, jerk. Oh! Ooh! Are you mother? Excuse me. I don't remember where it's at. Ow. A big part of the process of individuation is called making the unconscious conscious, which just brings bringing light to the more repressed areas of your psyche. Just being aware that they are there and they exist within you and they are part of who you are. And it seems like every time we go underground, we are doing just that. We are kind of bringing awareness to this repressed aspect of either America or the greater will society's shadow side. Carl is fast. Woo! Very, very fast. Whoops. And we know that smithing and forging and things like that is really the element in the domain of the giants. And the giants is something that America defeated. Something in her past that she did to repress another element of herself, another faction of society. And us going into those caves and bringing awareness to them and bringing light back into them is bit by bit America kind of accepting these parts of herself. And once we get down to Castle Morn, you know, a lot of it, the reason that Radigan has red hair is for that exact reason. He is born from the unconscious and has elements of the giants of the unconscious in him. Whoa! Jesus. Maybe I should just do a super fast, like, dual dagger. Good God. Get him? Nice. Predictions for the DLC. Where do you think we'll go? How much does it reach the collective unconscious realms? So I think the collective unconscious we've already completely explored. That being like the Nox, the Eternal Cities, the ancestral followers, the collective unconscious being kind of the timeline of how we got to where we got to, and more like how society treats outsiders as opposed to an individual. Like that's why greater will and society to me are one and the same. So when it says that the greater will got pissed and that's why the Nox are down there, that just means society did not like what they were doing and completely shoved them underground. And I think that we've already explored all of that. I think where we're going now is Marika's personal unconscious, her personal shadow. My guess is that we'll definitely encounter the Gloam-Eyed Queen. I think the big thing is going to be about reuniting jeez Louise. Reuniting back with Godwin, which we'll talk about in the Rosarium images, but basically the purified spirit and soul reunite back with the body, which is basically, you know, it's either Melina or Miquella that represents that purified capital self. So I think we'll basically be in the shadow realm where everything that we see that is at night here, the death birds and funeral steeds, will be kind of like the main enemy of the game of the DLC, and then somewhere along the line we'll reintegrate with Godwin. I think I think it'll be a fight. I think we'll fight kind of his soul, so to say, and purify and cleanse it. And then my guess is that the Glowmite Queen would be kind of like the final end boss. But so that's all you do?
Wait, please! I surrender! White flag and all! Finally come round, have you? I knew you.
And I think we'll either get there by interacting with Godwin's corpse or through Miquella's corpse. It would be my guess of how we actually get to the realm.
You're tarnished, like me. Now, how did I get that wrong? I took you for a demi-human or some such. An innocent mistake, I assure you. Well, water under the bridge. Now we're squared up. How about we play nice from now on? A true man of reason. I'm actually tarnished like you, only for now. Those retired soldiers return in exchange for my honesty, frankly. So I'll be ready to... Don't forget to pop back for... I'll be ready to...
And then I think like we'll also be uniting other pairs of opposites as kind of like the path that gets us to the Glowmite Queen.
Just joining the fray. Tarnished. Wow. You fought an Arius and survived. That alone deserves commendation. I'm your hunter of bloody fingers. Tarnished. Held in thrall by Sassplat. Zealots. You stalk their own. You stay the path. You're certain to face more of them. Just remember. No kinship with their ilk remains. Their madness precludes it. Only your emotions stay allied. Be on your way. Perhaps we will meet again. If fate permits.
All right. I think that's going to do it for me today, guys. Yeah, let me know what you guys think the DLC is going to be about. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. But I definitely think kind of what we see occur at night is going to be more or less what it's the overall kind of ambiance of it. And it's possible that we fight... it depends on how many DLCs that they have coming out too, how many they have planned. But Melina, the inner god, would be kind of like the ultimate end boss, because she would represent the Philosopher's Stone and all this different type of stuff. So it makes sense that we either fight her and kind of like envelop her, and we become the Philosopher's Stone, or she kind of takes us under her wing, just kind of like how Bloodborne happens, where we turn into a slug, and the doll kind of helps us along our way. I could see that happening as well. But either way, y'all, thank you so much for watching. As always, if this is something that interests you, be sure to subscribe, like, all that kind of good stuff. I love to build the community and get more people in here and get their thoughts and stuff like that. Be on the lookout for my next lore video, hopefully dropping maybe later this week. I think it's going to be kind of just a fun, cool one. And then I'll be on again. We'll talk about the second picture of the Rosarium, which is the emergence of opposites, and we'll probably shed some more clarity on the overall picture. But if you haven't and you're interested, you can buy this, I think, for like $10 on Amazon. The Mystery of the Keonthio, by Edward Edinger, who just summarizes Jung's kind of collective works and makes it more digestible for a layman. So anyways, y'all, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.